Hi, I'm Kathy Cesari, and this is the panel on reimagining education in school and at home. And I'd like to introduce you to our panel participants, or let them introduce themselves, starting with Kristina.
Hi, I'm Kristina Holzweiss. I'm an EdTech Specialist Librarian on Long Island, New York. I'm a member of the Nation of Makers. I'm a maker librarian. I love techie things, not low tech and high tech. And I write a Facebook group called Educators Reimagining Education, because we really need to have a seat at the table, especially now.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Bianca Forrester. I'm a principal in East Oakland. We are a Title I school. Pretty much 100% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. We have a very robust maker program there, and I'm a huge maker fan. I really feel strongly that we need to expand our notion of what the arts are and creative spaces to include maker movements, and that we need to expand the notion of what's valuable for kids to do by including maker classes in every school across the United States.
Hi, I'm Peter Rawitsch. I'm a retired public school teacher. I taught in the public schools for 42 years. In the last 38 years, I was a first grade teacher. My connection with maker spaces actually dates back to when I was in college, probably about 47 years ago. I went to a teacher's college in Boston, and the top floor of the classroom building had what was called a resource center, but I think in today's terms would simply be called a maker space. It was a place where we could create things to bring into our classrooms. Many of us taught in the Boston city schools that didn't have very many resources. And so it was very common that we would make materials, anything from games, items to use for lessons, or even furniture, using a lot of cardboard to create those kinds of things. As a first grade teacher, or let's say when I started teaching, I definitely had what I called a recycle center in my classroom, where students were able to go and use materials to create, just to create whatever was on their mind. Eventually, I'd say maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, I had brought technology into a makerspace in my first grade classroom with mixed results. The students and parents loved it. The school administration did not. So I bring that experience of having had success and also having had opposition to the maker world.
Yeah, so I'm Rick Shertle. Happy to be on this panel. I'm a public school teacher in San Jose, California, and this is my 27th year teaching. I taught middle school for 23 years, and this is my 4th year as the K-8 Maker Lab teacher at Steindorf STEAM School in San Jose, which is a new STEAM school in the same district that I've been in for 24 years now. So it's been a really wild experience starting a school with a lot of just amazing committed colleagues. And I think I'm a bit of a rarity as well, being a full-time, Maker Lab credentialed teacher here in California. So my maker world and teacher worlds have kind of come together. For many years, I've been involved in Maker Faire, done a lot of writing for Make Magazine, over 25 articles and 2 books. And I've just really just been thrilled with being involved in the maker movement. And I'm glad Maker Faire is continuing in this format. So also, along with Kathy, I've familiar with the homeschool world because we've homeschooled our 2 children through college. So we kind of know what, non-traditional educational formats look like. So that's kind of helped as I've moved from, the traditional classroom into distance learning. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation with this panel. So thank you.
Yeah, and just to give a little bit about my background, like Rick said, I'm a homeschooler. I'm not a trained teacher, but I'm self-taught. I'd homeschooled my 2 kids from kindergarten until they got into college, and they're both now graduated and working and wonderful. And I also, during that time kind of developed my maker skills, and I now write books of maker projects for kids. I've done 5 for Make, and I've done a few for another company called Nomad Press, and they all kind of have art and technology and history and all kinds of things mixed up in them. And I teach workshops, and right now I'm teaching virtual workshops. So I'm getting a little bit of that Zoom teaching experience that a lot of teachers have been getting. The interesting thing about homeschooling, when this all started, I thought I'm going to share my homeschooling experience with everyone, and everyone's going to really appreciate that. And I think within the first couple of weeks, everyone had way more experience than I did, and it was totally different kind than I started homeschooling before there was an internet, and everything was different. So I'm not sure that my experience is directly relatable, but it's been very interesting. I belong to a emergency homeschooling Facebook page in my local community for public school parents who found our homeschool group and wanted some advice. So I've been seeing what those parents have been saying and kind of keeping in touch with what's going on that way. But I want to hear, you know, your actual classroom experience or out of classroom experience going on right now. The first question I wanted to ask you is the online teaching model, and how's it been working for students, teachers, and families? Kristina, you have school-age children still too, right?
Yes, I do.
So how do you feel doing everything from every angle?
I became a librarian and an educational technology teacher because I love technology. I don't love technology right now. I'll be honest with you, I don't. My kids are 7, 9, and 11. And, you know, it's very difficult for my youngest because her teacher, she has 2 teachers. She's in dual language class, and they weren't trained for second grade teachers. You know, the third and fifth grade, 4th and 5th grade, they were already doing things on their Chromebooks and activities. But the K through 2, they weren't doing that. And I find that it's very difficult for her. It's very difficult for me. The work is not independent work. And I just ordered a workbook from Amazon so I can go over math with her. I want paper. I want paper. I do like the Google Meets. I think that's important. She hasn't gotten many of them, but I really do think that that's important. And right now we're seeing each other face to face. But I think some of what we think of as old school, I think there is value to, and I just liked her to have some, maybe be instructed by the teacher a little bit and then use the workbook, but it's not happening like that. And honestly, my kids have not had any like STEM activities, maybe 1 or 2 here and there. And this is the opportunity that they can do it. And it's drill and kill. It's using these videos, and I'm not going to mention names of programs, but they're giving me a group code. They're going in and they're watching these videos and answering these questions, and I'm sitting there going, it's losing its novelty. The novelty now is the hands-on learning.
Kristina, I think you raised some really great points in that commentary about, the importance of maker movement and maker space, and for kids to be hands-on and to be able to have something to do that's not just keyboard dependent, and it's not like that drill and kill, and really be in that creative space is just so important right now. And I also really appreciate what you said about kids needing to be in a space where they are able to collaborate with each other and with the teacher. I worry in education right now. So we have about 85% of our kids log on every day in some form, doing either synchronous learning. So they have, the teacher will be online with them for 30 minutes, and then they'll have some independent work, or asynchronous learning. And so it's been really interesting to see, but I think that the notion that computers are going to save the day in education is really what it comes down to. Is it goes back to that notion that we make meaning together, right? That professor at Harvard, that social learning happens when we're constructing meaning together. So I really feel like we're losing something, and I appreciate you for reminding us of that. I think for our teachers, it's been really intense learning curve for them. In particular, the challenge that I've had with my high school teachers is in supporting them. I work as an instructional coach with them to really get comfortable in this space online for that synchronous learning, for that instructional time where they're actually meeting with kids, focused with kids, engaging with kids beyond just pushing out an assignment on a Google Classroom. Because we really know, research shows that kids aren't able to engage in that way. And so the big challenge is really trying to get our kids to able to do that. For us in East Oakland, a big challenge that we have is a lot of our families are out of work and they're having to go to food banks to rely on food. And so a lot of kids don't have like a quiet, dedicated space where they would be able to be online in any format whatsoever. So that's been a big challenge. I think that's a big challenge for parents, because our parents are simply ill-equipped to support their children in this space. They don't have access to food, and for many of our parents, there's a serious language barrier. So really looking how creatively we can support the whole child is the challenge for us.
And how can we have a united front when there are people left behind? How are we going to band together when there are this, the kid, my own kids, their technology skills, they are really developing wonderful technology skills, but this is what's happening. They're going there, they have their Chromebooks, they have Wi-Fi, and this is what's happening. And those who are left behind are left behind even further.
That's right. We had to distribute tons of Chromebooks. We've distributed 107 Chromebooks to our families and several hotspots. And then some of the hotspots didn't work. They had to come back, and just those equity issues attendant. And then, some of the big cable companies, Access, right? They don't even operate in East Oakland. There is no cable out there to have Wi-Fi. So there's been an interesting movement here in Oakland that EdTech, they just came out with this. Jack Dorsey gave them $13 million or something to get everybody online, but that's not going to save us all either.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I was going to say, it's all the talk in California and probably around the country, just about the equity and just the widening of the achievement gap. California is just a massive state with so many public school kids. But I wanted to just mention briefly, being a maker teacher, how I've done, I'm kind of moving towards how to do hands-on making from home. And in the context of my, teaching situation. So March 13th, I left my classroom as a Friday, March 13th. I had no idea I wouldn't be back to my classroom for the rest of the school year. So it was like it was just abandoned. And I, arrived, and then I had to figure out how I was going to do this. So little plug for a session that I'm giving later today at 2:00. I'm actually doing a full 1-hour session on teaching making classes via digital distance learning. So I'm really going to get into the details and the nuts and bolts of what I've done with that. But it really came down to just working with what I have. So our school has 500 kids. My main gig is the middle school. I normally see them 2 days a week. That's 2 6th grade classes, 2 7th, and then 2 8th. So my main focus has been with them. So I've been meeting with them live via Google Meet every week, just for a half an hour. And then I've been finding ways to, get activities out to the K-5 using a video that I tape ahead of time. So doing the asynchronous, I guess is the word, and then some maker activities for them as well. And again, this is just thinking about what do they have around their house. So I'm emailing the parents and I'm saying, hang on to the Amazon boxes, hang on to the, toilet paper tubes, and we're going to be using all that stuff, in the next few weeks. So it's definitely been very, very interesting. And I'm excited. I just got off of a 2-hour call with our local union. I'm in a real small school district, only about 180 teachers. which is small for California. And we're just, all the talk is like, how is education going to look different, once we move into the next school year? And everybody's just really interested. And it feels like there was a massive educational reform that was forced upon teachers. Education, reform is really slow, normally moves really slow. And this was like, it just happened overnight. So excited to hear from, the panel more about that as we move into that topic.
And I'd like to speak on behalf of all the young children trying to replicate a learning environment that the children had in person, online. It's just not going to work. Learning requires relationships, and to try to replicate those relationships through a two-dimensional screen is simply not the same. I suspect that most of the teachers and their children had already established relationships, but I would argue that maintaining those at the same level on the screen is simply not going to cut it. I did have the opportunity to participate in a Zoom meeting this week with a second grade class at my former school, in which many of the students were my former first grade students. And having a chance to be part of their morning meeting was interesting because they were all muted. And I think when I taught, I always thought of myself as a performer, and getting audience response was just critical as to my facial expression, what I was going to do, and to have silence in teaching was frustrating to me as a teacher. I imagine that silence would also be frustrating for them as a participant, not hearing, sitting next to their buddy in a circle, in a group, just that lack of physical touch. So much is missing. And as has already been described, some of the programming that's been in place, the video, showing videos is simply not going to be able to replace the human contact and the relationships that are needed.
I don't know. I wish I had Peter as a teacher already. So.
Yeah. Same here.
I can tell already.
I'd like to share a really positive online experience I had this week, and I'm just gonna, grab something that I use. So I did a robotics workshop with 25 Cub Scout families earlier this week. And, this is not the project, this is the one. So as Rick was saying, as everybody's been saying, trying to find materials that I knew everybody would have at home. So I actually saw this on Twitter. It's calling it a robot walking dog made out of an index card, but you can make it out of, a postcard or a greeting card or any kind of stiff paper. Let's see if I can actually get it to walk here. Oh, there it goes. I'm not sure if you saw that.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
Delightful. I love it.
I love it.
So, normally I have this project that I do over, a 90-minute program in a library with a bunch of kids, but there's even, this is, it's craft sticks and bamboo skewers, but I can't even be sure that people would have, wooden beads at home. So to find something that can be made out of one piece of paper and scissors was wonderful, but just the teaching of it worked really well. And again, I didn't know these kids. They all knew each other, and they all had their parents with them, and it was informal. They weren't being graded. They didn't have a curriculum, that they had to meet. And I think that's part of what makes the kind of programs I do work really well. But, the kids were all muted, as we were talking about, but I did want to do the usual interaction with them. So I'm asking them questions and having them raise their hands. How many people think that a robot is a machine that moves? And they're, raising their hands, and they did unmute themselves and ask questions, and it really worked really well. And then at the end, they're all, showing off their little things to each other, and they're giving each other compliments, and they were able to talk to each other. And it was just, it's the most positive experience I've had. And I will tell you that a lot of what I was trying to do, I've been seeing on Maker Camp. Maker Camp has been doing a lot of live sessions of people building stuff. So I was, looking at them as a model. So that's worked really well for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've definitely used Maker-Camp as a resource, and I'm going to include your webpage too, Kathy, because you got a lot of great resources on your webpage. So I'm going to add that into my presentation and also my kind of resource list on the webpage I set up. So it's great to, have people that are doing things with simple stuff, around the house. So.
Yeah, Maker-Camp, the Maker-Camp has been instrumental for our teacher too, for Mr. Kim, in terms of just getting really good ideas and figuring out like, what do I want to do and how does that work for our contexts? And so he's definitely utilized that resource. He's also utilizing the project board resource, which has been really amazing. And we have a lot of vision around how we really want to go full board with project board next year.
I don't really, excuse me, teach students per se. I teach teachers. So I'm the head of the innovation lab in our high school. I taught middle school for 23 years and now in the high school. So teachers will come in with their classes. But right now I've been pushing out with PD. So teaching how to use the web tools that our school subscribes to. But lately I've been giving sessions on project-based learning. And I've got a few people come in, but whoever has come into the session really loves it. And I feel like my own children are not getting it from my home district, but if I can give it to where I'm working, again, stop the drilling, kill, and talk about project-based learning. And people are already coming in with projects. They're already coming with ideas. I'm just showing them how to turn them into project-based learning, how to find problems and solutions instead of just making a project. And the teachers are loving it. And I'm hoping that will help the shift when we do go back of that mindset of making and innovating. And we're all MacGyvers right now. We're all hacking, trying to figure out how to do this. And I hope they keep that spirit.
It's interesting that you say that around PBL, Kristina, because in my school, what's happened is the real fatigue that the kids have had and the families have had, and the community that we're serving. And what's happened since we've gone into distance learning is teachers who were not collaborating with each other previously across curricular domains have found out, oh, wait a minute, we should really be collaborating because the kids only have these many hours per day that they can attend to this. How can we make this collaborative for them? Like, how can we work together to make what we're doing more meaningful for the students we serve, to really get more bang for our buck, if you will? So I really, that's very resonant for me. Yeah.
I know in my former school district, that at the elementary level, that the elementary teachers are meeting with other teachers at their grade level in the other elementary schools in the district, so that there might be a team of 3 teachers in our district that all teach first grade, but each one's from a different building, and they collaborate on creating the lessons that are taught during the week. As opposed to every teacher fending for themselves. There seems to be a lot of reinventing the wheel. But what I heard from one of the teachers was how wonderful it is to be able to connect with teachers from other buildings. So it's not just within the confines of their own building that they're collaborating, but actually reaching out to the other buildings to get some fresh ideas. So that's one good part of the crisis that's come out of it, collaboration.
Looking at some of my questions that I wanted to discuss, how do you decide when you go back what's important, what you want to keep, and what you want to get rid of? One thing that I really feel was, the best part of homeschooling was not having to worry about evaluation and testing. And it's, I see so many parents complaining about, my kid wasn't able to log on and they're still being, graded on it and this kind of thing. And it just seems like the whole evaluation system needs to be rethought if there's going to be some kind of a mix of learning at home and learning in the classroom, which seems kind of where things might be moving to. So what do you guys think about that?
Well, I think it's gonna take place. It's taken place at higher ed. I think it was just announced in the news that the the SAT is going to be gone for admissions to the UCs in California. So I mean, it's really stirring things up like big time at all levels. Another thing I really appreciated about homeschooling too, Kathy, is that my kids, really were learning for the sake of learning, not just to perform well on a test. And I think, there's a role of evaluation and a role of assessment, I think, but I think this is causing a lot of, educators to, reevaluate that. So, or to reevaluate the role of assessment.
And I would say who thinks that any learning can be labeled with a number or a letter. And again, I'm speaking more as the elementary teacher, but I think it applies to all learners to think that some learning is an A or a B, or other learning is a 95 or a 97. And if you do the extra credit, you get an extra point. I would much rather see learning, using a first grade metaphor, go to show and tell. I would much rather have portfolios as evidence of what students are doing. So they show their work, and the tell part, of course, is talking about what they've learned and why it's important that they learn that. And that's something that tests don't ask. They don't ask, why is it important that you figured out this math problem? Why is it important that you solve this science problem on the test? And being able to do a portfolio in front of not just your teacher, but in front of your peers to get peer feedback, maybe with special guests, whether it's another member of the family, a grandparent, or some other educator from the same building, or another adult. And I'm all in favor of TED Talk type presentations.
Yep.
A 7-year-old that can speak, for 10 minutes on something, with visuals and just the confidence, the learning that's required to be able to deliver that is a much better way to assess progress that an individual's made than something in which you fill in a bubble, or where there's only one right answer. That's just wrong. We need better ways, the show and tell for first grade.
Well, that's
I think for high school too, I mean, it's really interesting because we're a data-driven, instructional focused school. We're the #1 school in Oakland. We have the highest test scores of all the districts and all the charter schools in Oakland. And you don't get there by not paying attention to that data, right? But what happens I think we're in this moment in education. It's like what you were talking about, Rick, like the big testing systems, they're pushing back hard because they make a lot of money off of testing kids. Like, and the question is what are the skill sets? What is it that we want for our children to be able to do in this country? What is it that we want for our workers to be able to do? What kind of thought? I mean, look at all of the media that's being driven at kids every day, and how do they develop the capacity for critical thinking skills with a deluge of all of this, media constantly, and the news and everything. I think we're in a really interesting moment. And so I think for assessment, I'm really hoping to see more of that PBL based stuff and more portfolio, more learning record kind of work, because I think that's really going to make a difference for our kids. And so many of these exams that kids have to take are gatekeepers, and they prevent kids from moving on in their lives, and we lose so many talented people. We lose so many talented, interesting people. And I think that's the thing about this creative makerspace. And that's why I think it's so vital to put makerspace in the context of schools. And really, I hope to see makers classrooms like what we have in our school. And our class is A through G approved through UC Doorways. So it's a UC approved class, and we just submitted an application a couple weeks ago for creative technologies too.
Bianca, I'm all for that, and Rick also, because I am that innovation lab, but some schools don't have that.
Yes.
It's that mindset though. that you don't need that room. I'll be honest with you, you don't need that room. You need to have that paradigm shift, and you have to nurture that culture.
Mhm.
You know, I tell people all the time, not one teacher in the classroom right now was born last century. It was born this century. We've all been born last century. All of us, even if you're just starting out.
Mhm.
Not one of our students was born last century. They've all been born this. We are centuries apart, literally, from our students. And to say that this is going to be what it's always been, no, it can't be that way. When I was 8 years, I mean, again, I love technology. When I was 8 years old, my nemesis was a computer. It was called Systems 80. And I actually looked it up online. I found that thing. And I had to sit in front of that machine, and it would spit out some information, and I would press some buttons. I was getting so anxious about it that my hair was falling out because I was not filling the quota. I felt like I was part of the machine, that I had to go and sit in front of this machine and punch buttons and things like that. And I love computers. My dream when I was 8 years old was to actually plug a wire into my head and download my information so I could get more. And I was stuck in front of that machine. Do we still want that in 2020?
Yeah. Well, I think you made a good point, Kristina, that you know, it's a different way of thinking. It's a different mentality. Our school is it has project-based learning woven throughout the thread of the school. It's really the theme, and it's really developed a unique mentality at the school. And it's not so much a space either. I think you were touching on that. You don't necessarily have to have the maker space, you know, a fancy space with fancy tools. It's just more of a way of thinking. And then, you know, making your way through that design process, ending with that public presentation. And those have been some of the most exciting times at our school, is seeing, you know, kindergartners, first graders, you know, sharing out to their parents, you know, to other people in the public, first graders sharing out with eighth graders, you know, their, you know, what it is that they, you know, being able to articulate their learning, what they learned along the way. So that's, you know, just really that whole kind of way of thinking, and seeing how authentic, you know, that assessment is compared to, you know, just filling in the bubbles.
I think I'd like to ask one last question. Again, from my homeschooling experience, one thing that was really great was my kids being able to, especially as they got older, choose their own projects that they were going to work on and just dive in. And I see so many parents and teachers saying, my kids aren't tuning in, they're not doing the work here, I'm doing all this prep and they're not taking advantage of it, and I feel like I'm wasting my time. Or parents saying, I can't make my, you know, third grader sit in front of the computer anymore, she's hiding under the bed. And I just want to say, so stop, you know, let her do what she wants to do. You know, why take her away from drawing horses if that's what she wants to do and is comforting to her at this time when everybody's stressed out. So I just wanted to get your input on how can we convince parents and teachers and schools to let kids do what is going to be good for that particular child.
I wanted to speak about curriculum, how damaging to have a curriculum can be to learning. I knew that when I taught, if it was the month of September, that every elementary student in my school was working on narrative writing, whether or not, you know, if they had an idea for some kind of a memoir. Oh, sorry, you can't write about that now. You'll have to wait until we get to March to write your memoir. Or if they wanted to do some opinion piece. No, you can't do that right now. Everyone's doing a narrative. And I think of the science curriculum in first grade, someone decided that all first graders should learn about the weather. What first grader is really excited about the weather? Why wasn't there a dinosaur unit? Why wasn't there something of, you know, about you know, volcanoes or things that were really exciting? Or better yet, why not have it be learner driven? I found that curriculums at the elementary level are very limiting, and unless and the way my workaround for those, because I was required to cover certain material or to have students do certain activities, was to set aside a half hour each day where the question was, what do you want to learn about? And let kids do independent projects on that and then support them. And if there were certain students that had similar ideas, they could work together on that, and maybe bring in a buddy class of older students to help kids do some of the research and the things. So because it'd be pretty hard for me to get to 25 students and all help them simultaneously, but working with a buddy class, bringing in experts as possible, either through a video conference or to bring them into the classroom to speak to the class about things. Just having learner-driven, student-driven learning is much more powerful. And I really see the curriculum as being, stifling student interest and creativity.
My son right now, like, he's going on YouTube videos and he's finding out how to do like stop animation and have the lasers come out of his little minifigures. And then I have to say, you have to go back to your schoolwork, because that's what's valued. Because yes, I want him to do all these wonderful things, but the bottom line, he's going to go into 6th grade and he's going to be placed in wherever he's going to be placed, and they're going to look at his report card and they're going to judge him on how well he's been in front of a screen. I mean, he is having Google Meets with teachers. He's getting more than my daughter is. But I want him to do those things, but we are the anomalies. There's a society out there that does not value all of this. And like you're saying, it's data. It's data. It's testing. The changes at the top.
Kristina, I think for me as a school leader, I realize how important, because I get to decide what that should look like and provide that opportunity and resources for my teachers. And it's really interesting. We're hearing you guys talk about like student voice and the self-agency that comes out of that, right? And so one of the things that I was doing a couple weeks ago, for example, you were just talking about stop animation and all that cool stuff. So our Mandarin teacher was really struggling to get some engagement with her kids. And so we started looking at all these really cool little programs where they could go online and do these stories and do that exact stop animation. And guess what? The kids found out ways to record themselves, create these wild little characters, and create these amazing projects and videos, and they're speaking Mandarin. And these are, kids in East Oakland whose families are not from China. So it is phenomenal what you can do if you can really push that creative force across the school. And it's been so exciting for me to see the stuff that kids have been creating in those. I was a foreign language teacher, so just working with those teachers. And then one of the things that we've done that for our final exams are this week. And we encouraged our teachers to offer a menu. Like, you could try this, or you could try this, and you can try this, and you can try this. And kids can select an option from that menu that is really interesting to them, and to go deeper on something, or to explore something, or maybe to go back and relearn something that they missed throughout the school year. So we've really been thoughtful and intentional around what assessment needs to look like at our school in our context, and not slipping rigor, to be real, but figuring out how to expect so much of our kids, but to do it in a way that is more holistic and more meaningful.
And activities like that are more difficult to arrange and plan and organize.
Yes.
And they take more effort to complete. You get more out of them. There is more rigor in those.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I'm going to be up to visit Bianca's school later in the year. Definitely want to check it out. You're only about 40 minutes north of me. So, but a lot of thoughts going through my head. We weren't expecting to be a homeschool family. We kind of ended up in that, and it was a great journey. My wife's in the other room, I think, listening to our panel and just nodding her head and, really just agreeing with, what everybody's saying here. It's really fun. But I read a book a number of years ago. I think it was John Taylor Gatto. And it really just got me thinking, rethinking, you know, what does an educated person look like? And it sounds very basic, but it dawned on me, an educated person isn't just following the California state curriculum, because in Oregon, they don't do that. In New York, they don't do that. In Massachusetts, they don't follow the California state curriculum. I know that sounds basic, but I think California teachers think, you know, you have to follow this curriculum, you have to hit all the standards in order to be an educated person. And through the homeschool journey and just seeing our kids explore their own interests, we took a semester off and we just traveled. And it was like doing school on the road. And it's you know, you have school and then you have education. And, you know, life is kind of education. All of life is education. You're always learning, you know, in whatever situation you're in. So I think now that, you know, kids aren't in school, they're, you know, people are starting to reconsider, well, you know, school isn't necessarily the same as education, you know, they can be together and, you know, share some things, but, you know, they're going to have to really, you know, kids are really going to have to figure out what it looks like, you know, to learn on their own. So, and I think they're so not used to doing that. It's really kind of a new thing for them, you know, that they're starting to figure out now. A lot of kids out there. So.
Great point.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think this has been a great conversation, and hopefully we can do something like this again. Maybe Maker Camp will let us do some more of these because they're really interesting. So thank you everybody for participating, and hope that everybody watching is enjoying Maker Faire and just take advantage of all the great resources that are out there now. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Kathy.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thank you, Kathy.